Yes. So I'll go over some of the logistics really quick. So our Wi-Fi password for all of you who are in the room that want to use our Wi-Fi, it's multimodal 8, the number 8 at the end. It's all one word, multimodal, and then no space, the number 8. And that's our TPA guest Wi-Fi password. To the left, there's the restrooms. There's a door. You can go through those doors. There's both men and women's bathrooms. And to the left is our cafe. We have some snacks and okay. So through that door is our restrooms. To the left is the snacks and our cafe. If you're hungry, if you want snacks or coffee or anything. Multimodal 8 is our Wi-Fi password. And thank you all for joining. We're going to record this live, and we have a number of online participants that will also participate and potentially ask questions. So thank you all for being here in person, as well as those that are joining us virtually. And first order, I just wanted to go around and do a quick round of introductions for the TPA staff and the FDOT staff. Will be the ones that you'll work with directly for each one of the programs. Or if you're getting lab certified, you'll work with Maya from FDOT. So to start, my name is Jason Price. I'll be managing the Local Initiatives Grant Program. And we also have Valentina Facus. She's going to do our Transportation Alternatives Program. She's right behind me. And then also Andrew Euler, is going to do our state road modifications, as well as Nathan George, our new long-range transportation plan coordinator, which is not in the room, but he's going to start with us on Monday. So he'll be a new addition to our staff, and he'll be managing our state road modifications program. And then we also have Maya Williams from FDOT. You want to say hello, or is that good?
I can say hello.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maya Williams-Gray. I am the local program administrator with FDOT.
So we have a pretty extensive agenda here. We're going to go through each one of the programs individually. We're going to go over what's required, the scoring criteria for each one of them. Then we'll move into the online application tutorial of how to apply for each one, what are all the required documents, where to find them, where to submit them for each one, and then some of the resources that we offer to help you either fill out the grant or identify best scoring strategies with our interactive map. And so with that, I'm going to get started in the presentation. It's just a quick overview of some of the statistics for each one of the programs. The first is state road modifications. The second is local initiatives. The third is transportation alternatives. Those are the 3 grant programs that we're offering this year. It was formally adopted in October by our governing board, which adopted the program overviews and the scoring systems. And then that kind of kicked off the program, and here we are today with the grant workshop. And so to begin, all of these programs are reflective of and inclusive of a few of the documents that we produce here. And the first is our long-range transportation plan, and the other one is our Vision Zero action plan. So the first one, our long-range transportation plan, that has a number of our overarching goals and objectives for our long-range transportation plan and the TPA overall. And the first one is preserve, the second one is safe, third is efficient, fourth is connected, and the fifth is multimodal. All of these are the overarching goals for the plan, and we've incorporated this into our objective scoring systems, and you'll see some of that in our scoring system of how we incorporate all of these goals within the scoring system. And inclusive of that scoring system is also our Vision Zero action plan. So our first effort was back in April in 2019. That's when we first created our Vision Zero action plan for the agency. And then we recently updated it in October 21 with new revised data and some of principles. So from there, you'll see some of those metrics and some of those things that you find in the Vision Zero action plan, like our high injury network. We're going to use that. It's kind of baked into the scoring systems. So you receive points by utilizing our Vision Zero action plan, identifying the areas that are high injury or the areas with the most opportunity for improvements to make it safer for bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicles, because there's unlit areas that make it dangerous for all users on the roadway. And as always, the TPA Governing Board, we also adopt a target of 0 for traffic-related fatalities and injuries. And that's always a kind of a standing goal to reach 0 injuries and fatalities on our roadway through the implementation of these types of projects to make it safer on the roadways for everyone. Some other pieces, if you are planning on applying for a grant and you want to administer it yourself through the LAP program, that's the local agency program that Mile will cover, you're required to have an ADA, American with Disabilities Transition Plan. And so there's a number of resources here on the slide, palmbeachtpa.org/ADA. You can go there to find some resources on on more information about a transition plan, or you can contact our public relations director directly at mmurray@palmbeachtpa.org. That's Melissa Murray. And also with FDOT, they might be able to provide resources as well on how to complete an ADA transition plan, which is required for LAP administration. So next is getting into some of the more important dates. The very first date to think of is February 17th. That's our application deadline in 2023. Prior to that, though, is our pre-application meetings, and I'll highlight that in the presentation as well. The first thing you're going to want to do after this workshop is schedule a pre-application meeting to discuss your project if you already have a project in mind and you have it pretty well conceptualized, or if you don't. Either way, you have to it's required to have a pre-application meeting, and I've set up a few days in August or in November, and then I'll follow through with December and January. We'll have 3 or 4 days each month where you can schedule a time for about 45 minutes to either come into the office or participate virtually and go over the projects that are potential projects that you'd like to submit. And in that audience will be FDOT and TPA staff, and both of us will sit with the applicant, go over the project, and it's just a good Q&A to understand what the project is, which program is the best fit for the potential project that you'd like to apply for. But here, the application deadline is most notable for this particular, for this part of the schedule. And then when you move on through the schedule, after the application deadline, that's when the TPA and FDOT vetting process starts. And so with the vetting process, that's where FDOT looks at all of the submittal application material, the complete package for each applicant, and reviews all the material, and then requests additional information, clarification, and that'll start in late March for the first email. So that's the more intensive part because we're looking at all of the application material for the first time. And then between that, there'll be a back and forth, an opportunity for the applicants to respond back, to provide the information, and then we'll start to do field visits in mid-April. After those field visits, that's when we'll do the second email request. And these emails are the back and forth between FDOT, TPA, and the applicant to just clarify what's happening and get all of the documentation, accurate cost estimates, right-of-way information, all of that stuff needs to be complete and accurate for them to make an eligibility determination. So the eligibility determination happens later on in May in 2023. And that is the most important part, to say these projects made it through the vetting process and are eligible for funding, and they'll be included in our list of priority projects that will then go to our governing board and our committees in July in 2023. So by applying this cycle, you'll know more about if you made it to the list of priority projects next year in July in 2023. And if anyone has any questions throughout the presentation on any of the information, feel free to chime in, raise your hand, and I'll stop and we'll answer questions along the way. Because it's a long presentation, so feel free to interrupt at any time. So probably the most interesting or the best information yet to be provided is additional funding. So last year, there was the standard amounts that we've seen for all programs, but this year, through our federal transportation authorization of the bipartisan infrastructure law, this federal funding, they have a specific program within it called the Carbon Reduction Program funding. And so this carbon reduction program is formula funds. Well, there's formula funds and these funds that have been provided to us through FDOT, and we've incorporated about an additional 3 million into our local initiatives grant program, as well as other money, as well as our TA program, the transportation alternatives. So both of them have received additional funds that you'll see on the next slide. But the carbon reduction program overall, the general purpose is to reduce emissions from highway sources. And they've outlined a few different ways to do that. One is pretty straightforward, reducing single occupancy vehicles. The others are looking for better construction methods to reduce emissions or encouraging alternative modes of transportation that also lower emissions. And they've outlined a few different projects that I saw in the actual carbon reduction program documentation. They've outlined a few different kind of eligible project types: truck stop electrification systems, electrical vehicle charging infrastructure that may be of interest if you're moving in that direction as a municipality to provide more electrical vehicle charging infrastructure in your municipality, and as well as public transportation projects like for PalmTran or SFRTA seeking electric vehicles, or an electric vehicle transition plan of getting electric buses, or SFRTA purchasing new rolling stock. Those kind of public transportation projects are inclusive of this carbon reduction program funding. And lastly, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. We're always advocating for better facilities, a more complete network throughout Palm Beach County. So all those are just a short list of the types of projects that are eligible for this particular funding, and that's why it's incorporated into the local initiatives grant program. And so here is just a little breakdown. It's the same slide you saw before, but I just wanted to highlight the pieces here that are changing from last year. So the total funding for local initiatives increased from 20 to 26 million, and then transportation alternatives went from about 3 million up to 5 million, and the maximum per project has also increased to 1.5 million, where it used to be 1 million. And with that, I'm going to bring up and introduce Andrew Euler. He's going to go over the State Road Modifications Program, and we're going to go into a little more detail about each one of the programs.
Good afternoon, everyone. So for the State Road Modifications Program, we actually, as Jason mentioned, have a new planner starting with us on Monday. His name's Nathan George. He's going to be our long-range transportation plan coordinator, and he'll be taking over this program. But really, when it comes to all your ideas and meeting with our staff, early in the process, you can meet with any one of our staff on this. And once it gets more through the vetting and figuring out where you want to prioritize, that's when you'll be going to specific planners on staff. But for the State Road Modifications Program, this is really to advance safety, complete streets, and other modifications to state roadways. So the ones that are owned by the Florida Department of Transportation. The reason for that is this uses state funding, mostly our state gas taxes, and it must be spent on state facilities. We roughly get around $20 million a year to prioritize towards state roadways. And so when we receive applications for these, which can be up to $5 million towards these projects, we're looking to do those on state roadways with a minimum reimbursement of $500,000. Again, this is towards safety and complete streets. So it can include products such as lane narrowing, transit infrastructure, general safety for striping and marking, ITS systems, pet bike facilities, lighting. So all types of different infrastructure. And then when you get into the scoring, you'll see where it sort of caters more towards. And it's really heavily catered towards safety improvements and then non-motorized facilities. For this, these are going to be administered by the DOT. So you as an applicant would be working with the DOT and the TPA on the concept really early in the process, so 6 weeks before submission. So if you're thinking about something on a state roadway, we really need to start coordinating with DOT now. We have Maya Williams in the room and with our TPA staff to get these projects and their concepts sort of vetted by AFDOT to see if it's a viable project early on, because in the end, they're going to be the ones designing and constructing these projects. Typically, the funding for this is going to be a little bit further out for these types of projects in the state roads. So design is most likely going to start in a new 5th year of our work program to get into AFDOT's work capacity to administer that project. And the construction will be a few years after that. A caveat to that is if you're seeing projects that are already about to go on in your communities on state roadways. So for example, if there's a bridge reconstruction going to be coming up here soon, or in the next few years, or if there's going to be a resurfacing job a couple of years away. We can really work on that now with you to sort of incorporate additional concepts into that resurfacing job or that bridge project. They get incorporated into that project, and then that could be an application that you submit for approval for this program. And then I'll turn it back over to Jason to go through the other ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, Jason. No, the design could potentially be could be incorporated and paid for through the program, because you're going to work directly with FDOT and they may take on the project and implement the project, so they would pay for the design as well. And yes, CEI. Yes, yes. Sounds like the answer is yes. Awesome. So
yeah, one more thing. Good point. Sorry, Jason. I was going to say, when you submit for these sort of products, it is sort of a final approval by FDOT and the TPA. So although you may come up with a concept and all that, it's really not all relying on the applicant then, right? I mean, obviously you bring the composite to it, but it's something that we would prioritize as the TPA to really push forward. So a lot of the design is taken over by DOT and the TPA. So it might vary from that original concept in the end, but yeah.
Yeah, so the takeaway is the concept that you bring forward, if it's feasible, it may change for them to be flexible enough to incorporate it, but you will see some improvements to some degree what they deemed feasible on a state roadway, which seems to be the, they're the largest roadways that carry the most capacity. So they're the hardest ones to maybe facilitate incorporating more access and mobility into them, but it's always feasible. So with the Local Initiatives Grant Program, this is a standalone program that you would apply for independently. And with these particular projects, it's been very successful in the past in producing a wide range of projects, including complete streets projects, capital projects like Palm Trent has electric vehicle transition program. They've been successful in getting electric buses and bus stops. Other transit capital projects have been SFRTA. Tri-Rail has received funding for new rolling stock, and I think other municipalities have purchased trolleys with this particular program for transit. There's also a lot of the projects incorporate complete streets concepts for non-motorized infrastructure that usually incorporate either sidewalks, bicycle facilities, whether they're designated bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, and ultimately we are strong advocates for shared use paths, taking all of the multimodal traffic, bikes, pedestrians, and creating a separated facility completely away from the roadway or separate from the roadway. That's the ideal situation that we're shooting for, to create the safest facilities for all users on the roadway. It also includes freight, airport, railroad improvements, truck movement. All of these are eligible under local initiatives. So it has a very wide range of projects and eligibility for this particular program. And the funding has increased from 20 million to 26 million, like I mentioned before. So there's more money available, and the maximum per project is upwards of 5 million, which it's easy to reach when you're implementing a long length of roadway with incorporating a number of different facility types, either adding bike lanes, changing out an intersection and improving an intersection to some degree, or widening paths or putting in new paths for a couple miles. It's easy to get to 5 million, but this program has produced a good range of projects. So with that, if you were to apply this year, your design is expected to be completed by 2026, and then your construction funding would become available in fiscal year 2028. And so that, I'll turn it over to Valentina, and she'll go over the Transportation Alternatives Program. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. And for the Transportation Alternatives Program, this program mainly funds safe routes to school projects, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and overall safety projects. In addition to, there's a list on the slide that illustrates the rest of the eligible projects. So TA is distinct in the way that it can fund projects on or off the federal aid roadway network. So that does include local projects or local roadways. As Jason mentioned, we have received additional funding for LI and TA. So for transportation alternatives, for last year, the program had an overall of $3.3 million of available funding for the program, with a $1 million maximum per project. And this year, the program's looking at $5.1 million of available total funding, with a new maximum reimbursement of $1.5 million per project, keeping the same $250,000 minimum. And also the Transportation Alternatives Program is different because it is a 3-year program. So funding for design will begin fiscal year 2024, and that must be funded locally. And for construction funding, that will become available fiscal year 2026. And that concludes an overview for our 3 funding programs. I'm going to pass it over back to Jason, and he's going to go over our required documents.
Okay. Thank you, Valentina. So there's a lot of required documents for submitting an application, or it's all needed to complete the vetting process. And so I'm going to go over, we're going to kind of transition from the overviews for each of the programs and then kind of dig into each one of the required documents. And we'll go through a walkthrough for each one of these. So we're going to do some transitions now from the presentation to our website to kind of walk through some of these particular items. But this is the list of items, and we're going to go through each one of these. So the first one is our application. And with the application walkthrough, I'm going to start with the Local Initiatives Grant Program. So if we could go to our website and Local Initiatives, I'll show you how to get there. So from here, funding, and then local initiatives. And then when you scroll down, you'll see our program overview is there, but then also how to submit an application. And then when you see how to submit an application, you're going to see a lot of resources here. The first link, there's a number of different links. We're going to cover the one at the top a little later on the application portal on where you're going to submit all the information. But just below that, you see local LI application form. So when you do LI application form, that's going to be the application that you'll click on it. It's going to download a PDF file. When you open up that PDF file, you'll see that it's the application for who is applying, what's the project, what do you want to build, you know, do you own the right of way, and who's doing what, who's funding which particular part of the application, which part of the project. So design is always covered usually by the applicant, and construction funding is through the TPA. So we're funding the construction funding for the project, as well as the CEI is by the applicant. So when you go further down, just some basic application information in terms of contact information, project location, and then, you know, how does this project fit into the goals and objectives of the program, whether it's complete streets project, a transit capital project, non-motorized infrastructure, like I mentioned, for bike and pedestrians, freight efficiency, or other eligible activities. So those are the categories that you'll check one of those boxes to identify, to determine if the project is eligible or if it meets those. And then some of the logistics for the project, some of the details of the existing facilities. This is the right of way. This is the width that we have to work with. And then the proposals for if you're implementing pedestrian, bicycle, or motorized vehicle facilities, if you're changing the widths of the roadway or for bicycles and pedestrians, you would identify it there and within the right of way that you have to work with. And then just some other project scope information items, ADA, access management, lighting, landscaping, just a few other ones. And then there's probably a few more of these. And then at the bottom, there's a signature box as well. So those are all the questions to answer. When you download it, you'll see it. And then just at the bottom, this is the one page that's important, just to sign the application, scan it, and then include it back to us. And with that, if we go back to the presentation. So from here, I wanted to note on the left-hand side, I have kind of like radio boxes for, or at least identifying what are all the required documentations that we're going to go through, starting with application. We're going to move through the aerial maps, typical sections, right-of-way, resolutions, cost estimates, and photographs of the project. So those are going to kind of highlight as we walk through these. Continuing on with the applications, there's a couple different ways that you can implement a project that I mentioned before, and that's through the local agency program. So the LAP program is probably the go-to way to implement a project independently for a municipality or for the county. That's the best way to go about it, because you have full control over implementing the project as a municipality. However, you do have to get LAP certified in order to be eligible to utilize that program. The other way is to request FDOT to implement the project on your behalf, whether it's on or off the state highway. They're more favorable to on the state highways that they already own, but off system can be considered as well. They just ask that you coordinate with them early and let them know what your project is, what your ideals are, and if they can accommodate it in their work program. The other way to implement a project is through transit, and transit projects are specific to the two transit agencies that operate in Palm Beach County, and that is Tri-Rail, which is also SFRTA, and Palm Tran, which is our county bus transportation agency that's here as well. And so both of them are able to flex the funds that we provide through the grant to FTA, and then they're able to use the funds either to buy transit capital or bus stops or things of that nature that are pertinent to transit. So they pretty much flex the funds that we provide to FTA, and that's just another way to implement a project. The last one is state road modifications. Now this is almost identical to local initiatives in terms of you would go to our website, go to state road modifications, and follow the links to submit an application, download the application, complete it, sign it, include it in your application packet. But here I just outlined a few of the steps that are specific to state road modifications, and that is first discuss the idea with TPA and FDOT as soon as you come up with something or when you know what you would like to do, and then apply through the state road modifications application, through the program. And we'll learn more through the pre-application meeting about what the concept is that you'd like to implement. And then through that process, working directly with FDOT to get some support from them before submitting an application. And they recommend about at least 6 weeks in advance before the February 17th, 2023 application deadline. So prior to that, reach out to FDOT if you have a concept that you would like to be considered on a state roadway. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Valentina, and she's going to go over the next couple pieces for the aerial maps, typical sections, and right away.
Thank you, Jason. The next required document is an aerial map illustrating the project limits. So in order to create this aerial map with the limits, you can use one of our resources called our TPA mapping tool that you can find on our website. We have a layer on that tool that's called parcels. You can turn that on, and with that parcels layer, you'll be able to see the right-of-way. Other resources that you can use for this aerial map is the Palm Beach County GeoNav website and also Google Earth. Additionally, another required document is a typical section for your project. So applicants are required to submit a typical section of the existing conditions and the proposed conditions. And you can use the free resources that are out there, such as Street Mix and Street Plan. Additionally, right-of-way documentation is the next required document. And for the right-of-way documentation, it should be the extent of the project. And it has to identify where the property is, and the elements should be within the project's limits, and no project construction is allowed outside of the public right-of-way. You can also use the county plats as a starting point to find this right-of-way documentation, or you can use your local municipality. With that, I will pass it back over to Jason.
Thank you. So moving along with the application, the required documentation to submit a completed application packet, there's resolutions that are required. A couple different pieces that are needed for the resolution are included here. And the first part is a resolution from your governing board committing to construct the project as proposed if it is funded, as well as if the project is not on, if you don't own the right of way where the project is being constructed, which is possible depending on who's implementing the project, you would get include that in the resolution from the facility owner that they support the project if it is funded. And if it's FDOT, support from FDOT to administer the project if they're the lead on the project, constructing the project. And this stuff, and the resolutions are due 60 days, a few months after the application deadline, which is February 17th. And so these are due April 28th. So that gives you, the applicant, some time to draft a resolution, include this language in it, get it approved by their governing board, and then submit it after you've successfully submitted an application for funding. One more letter in addition to the resolutions is a commitment letter from your engineering or public works department committing to administering the project, constructing it, and owning and operating it after it's constructed as well, but ultimately constructing the project as it's outlined in the application. And that's something that's due at the time of the deadline. So when you submit your application, you should have a commitment letter from your public works or engineering department committing to construct or own and operate the facility once it is constructed. Now, the next piece is the cost estimate. And this is always a tricky part because there's a couple different pieces. There's participating items and non-participating items. And so we're going to pull up the two different cost estimates that are required. Well, one of the two, there's two different ones. One is for LAP administered projects where the municipality gets LAP certified and then they use that cost estimate to complete. Or if you are going to get the project completed by FDOT, if they're going to be the administering agency for the project, that is a different cost estimate. But when you go to our website, you'll find on each one of them, like local initiatives, you have a choice of two different ones, transportation alternatives that can only be administered through the LAP program. And so the first part, most notable here, is this is a cost estimate shown here for a LAP administered project. And so there's two different sections here, and there's the FHWA participating and non-participating components of the project. So it's kind of split screen in between the two. If we can scroll, okay, so you see participating and non-participating items. Now, for participating items, that's all of the reimbursable costs for your project. And if your project is over 5 million, we recommend that you put in all of the project elements, even if it's over the cap of 5 million, because through the vetting process, the FDOT will work with the applicant to identify all of the eligible participating items versus the non-participating items, which would be, that cost would be borne by the municipality. So those are the two columns, but it's important to complete it, sign it, get it stamped by an engineer and include it in the application packet, but ultimately putting in all of the costs for the project, even if it's beyond the maximum amount of 5 million for local initiatives or state road modifications or transportation alternatives. Each one has a maximum, but to identify all the costs for the project, just to facilitate a better vetting process by FDOT to identify all the costs, known costs of the project. Yeah. So that is the cost estimate part. And there's one last part for photographs for the project, existing conditions. And I'm going to let Valentina cover that part and then a few more parts after that. There you go.
Thank you, Jason. So finally, applicants are required to submit existing conditions of their project in the form of photographs. So we do prefer in-person photos, but if that's not possible, then you can use Google Street View. Each program will have its own distinct scoring system. So applicants are encouraged to use our interactive scoring mapping tool, which is located at the submit an application at our website for each of our funding programs. The mapping tool will help to score your application and get a rough estimate of how many points you can get. And one useful layer that you can use for that is the Vision Zero High Injury Network for bicycle and pedestrian in dark or unlit areas from our Vision Zero action plan. And this layer will help applicants identify where the crashes are within an area. And as I said in the previous slide, each program will have its own distinct scoring system by topic. So as you can see on the graphic, the Transportation Alternatives program does not include vehicular facilities as part of the scoring criteria. And now we'll pass it back over to Jason to touch on how to submit applications.
Great, thank you. So that concludes the in-depth of all of the application documents that are required for a completed application package. So now we're gonna just do a little bit more of the walkthrough of where to submit all of the documentation. Once you download it or prepare it, where do you go from here? So from our TPA website, I'll kind of walk you through for local initiatives and state road modifications of where to go to find the information and then where to submit it at our portal. And then after that, Valentina will go through the FDOT GAP website to submit a transportation alternatives application. So from here, when you go to our website, you'll see on the top there's a funding tab. When you click on that funding tab, you can either choose local initiatives, transportation alternatives, or state road modifications. And when you do that, you can pick, in this example, we'll pick local initiatives. When you scroll down, just as we did in the past, how to submit an application. When you go to how to submit an application, this is where you'll find all the additional information, but here is the completed application portal on the very top. So when you do click on that, you'll see that this is where you will complete the project information in terms of the project name, the application number. You can just provide a number for it if you have one. We usually just assign it one just to identify it if you submit multiple applications. So with local initiatives, applicants can submit up to 2. The county can submit up to 6. And so oftentimes, or sometimes in some occasions, you'll get multiple applications from the same applicant. And so just some type of number helps identify each one of them. And so you'll see here that there's some areas where you can click on the choose file to upload a file. And these are all the required documentation links that you will use. The first one being the completed application that would be completed and signed. Next one is the photos of the aerial photos of the location where the project is, the typical sections that'll show the existing roadway typical, and then the proposed roadway typical that shows you the proposed improvements, and then ownership right of way verification, followed by resolutions. And that's not due right away, but you also have following that the letter of support that is also due at the time of the deadline of the applications. And that's the letter of support from the Public Works or Engineering Department committing to construct the project. And let's see, what else we have? There's there's the cost estimate here. That's where you would upload it here. And then the photographs of the existing conditions. And there should be possibly public outreach is another one. And the last one here is the resolution of approval from the local municipality or governing board indicating support of the project. And then when you have all of those uploaded, some of them are actually required. So you might not be able to submit until you upload a document within some of those required fields. So you see that this has on here, this field is required. So a few of these fields that I've labeled with asterisks that identify these are the required ones that you need to upload something, and then you could submit, and then it'll just give you a notification that you've successfully submitted an application. It'll notify us, and then we'll follow up with the applicant that we receive the information, and we'll start the vetting process after the application deadline. So. Yeah, so now we'll go into.
We have a question.
Yes.
Can you work on the application in drafts, or do you have to do it all at one time? Like, does it save your progress?
It does not save the progress. It's only a final application that you would upload. However, you can download it, complete it, and there's always contact information if you have questions on any part of the application, whether it's LI, TA, or SRM. You can always reach out to us to get additional information or clarification on components of the application that you might be uncertain about. Yes. Yes. Public outreach is required for specific projects that impact single-family homes that are immediately adjacent to the project. So it's not always required, but it's highly recommended that you do show public support for the project. Yeah, and so it's part of our scoring program, scoring rubric for each one of the scoring. It's not necessarily required, but it's highly recommended. And it's required in specific instances, but if it's not required and you still do the public outreach to show public support of the project, you do receive additional points in the scoring. So it's always highly recommended to show public support for the project because it's usually impacting somebody. It's improving the roadway, but oftentimes it is impacting people's driveways and just ability to access their property, whether it's a single family home or a commercial property. But we focus on single family homes typically where it's the primary access to the property. So if you're doing a roadway improvement that's going to directly impact how they get into their driveway or into their home, we require you to go out and to get, to do public outreach to ensure that there is public support for the project. And it's oftentimes on local roadways is where we're changing the most, there's the most drastic improvements along a local roadway where we're adding sidewalks or adding a bike lane or something of that nature that'll change the dynamics of the roadway. Sure. Yes.
You will have to, like, for example, if I get letter of support of the HOA.
Yep.
That be that section or the section of the public outreach?
It is.
You mentioned that it's separate public outreach. I don't know, but I would imagine that probably like minutes of the charrette or any pictures of
Correct.
whatever.
Yep.
Do we compare that particular thing or separately?
It's right here. So right in the application portal where you would upload all of the documentation for a completed application packet. You see here, it says click below to upload the letters of support. So the letters of support could act as two different things. It could be public outreach, like a public outreach meeting where you have a sign-in sheet, and you have photos of the public outreach session. That could act as the letters of support, or the letters of support could be from an HOA or, organizations or, schools in the area, or, anybody who directly benefits from the project or is impacted by the project. Those are the people who usually will endorse the project and provide supporting documentation. Oh.
Hello. No.
Oh, it just went.
Please. Yeah. Okay. With regards to utilities, I saw that that is not covered in as part of the funding.
Right, Richard.
But oftentimes municipalities have arrangements with some, for example, with the FPL, that they uses their facility as for lighting, for street lighting, for example.
Correct.
And then let's say that you're planning a project and then that facility needs to be removed or relocated as a result of the project that you're planning. Would that be considered as a part of the project cost, or will be considered as a utility? Because often I have run into that issue, for example, in the city of Boca Raton, when we're doing the trail in Palmetto Park Road. And then, some of the lighting that they have there they had an agreement between the city and for the lighting per se, for the street lighting. And then they had to relocate it. So they were looking for reimbursement, and DOT said we're not.
Yeah, it's not reimbursable. Utility relocation isn't covered under the grants.
So there's, they have to have a local match
so
for
the
that.
municipality would have to cover the cost of relocating utilities as part of a project. Unless is there any additional information that you might want to
Even though it's being used for other purposes than just, the transmission lines, because,
Okay. No, it is for FHWA funds, federal aid funding. All utility relocation is non-reimbursable. If you are going to be, especially if the project is going to be administered through LAP, then we encourage you to have participate in the pre-application meeting so we can take a look at your project scope. But we don't, in part of our contracts, utility isn't part of it. So it would have to be done outside of your construction contract. It will need to be done if it's utility relocation is needed as part of your project. You'll need to do that before your actual construction project comes online, or if it was able to be done afterwards, but not part of your LAP project that's awarded through the grant.
What I meant is, for example, when you do all the off systems that we did in Broward, or we do it in Palm Beach as well sometimes. So those projects get funded, and then DOT is doing it on behalf of the county or of some other municipality. So my question when you submit this application, you have to get the JPA or whatever funding mechanism to support any utility that needs to be performed as part of the project beforehand while you submit the application, or to have it secure, because sometimes if you don't have that, the project is pretty much not moving forward. So that's my concern about that.
Okay. Well, if you're applying for local initiative funding, more than likely the project will be administered by the local municipality, not the department. And if it's going to be administered by the local municipality, that scope of work that's awarded would not incorporate utility relocation. That would be done outside of the construction project. It cannot be part of it because you're restricted to a certain time frame for constructing these projects. A lot of times these are smaller in nature. Utility companies, we don't have a contract. Your LAP agreement that we enter into that secures your federal funds is with the local agency. So if you have a utility, a third party that's involved, their schedule may not align with your construction schedule of the LAP project. So that's why you're encouraged to do it beforehand and not jeopardize your funding on for the LAP project.
Okay.
But FHWA will not reimburse for any utility costs. And if you are going to incorporate it in terms of a grant into your grant application, then it needs to be an agreement with that utility company that's going to adhere to the schedule of the LAP project.
Okay.
And that'll get, further down the line, but we have pre-application meetings. And if you have a project that you're thinking of submitting that will involve utility relocation, then I encourage you, where we have our engineers that are part of that meeting, to, properly give you some feedback.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. And any other questions? No? Anything online? Does anybody submit questions online? Okay. Okay. Okay, so we'll just go back to the PowerPoint real quick, and she'll introduce a couple of the slides of what she's going to what Valentina will walk through, and then we're going to transition to the website.
Thank you. And there is a small difference between when you're applying for the TA program, LI, and SRM. So this is just for TA. So only for TA, you're going to be using the FDOT GAP application portal, which we have included in our TA website. So Andrew, you can go ahead and pull it up. Okay, so all applications and supporting materials must be submitted through the FDOT GAP portal. So if you do not already have an existing account, then all you have to do is at the bottom left-hand corner, you see there's a request user access. So you have to click that. So Andrew, you can go ahead and click it. And then you would just put your name, title, all of your information, and then you should be receiving access within the following days from FDOT. Once you have your login information, you can log in. Then you will head over to applications. Then new grant opportunities. And you're going to select click on the drop down and select Palm Beach TPA. And there's going to be 2 on there. So make sure you are selecting the fiscal year 2023 Transportation Alternative Program. And there's 2 options on there. There's view and apply. So if you just want to go ahead and view all of the required documents, you can click that and download it. And when you're ready to apply, so you can open one up, Andrew, just to show them. So that's what the application will look like just for the TA program. Yes, Jason.
Hello? Okay, sorry. So there's two separate packages that are required, package for TPA and package for FDOT.
So are you talking about the application itself?
Yes.
So the application itself for TA, that's from FDOT, so you'll be using that. But we have that document at the TA website.
So it just redirects you.
Yeah, it just redirects you.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
So we do have it in both locations. You can either find it on our TA website or you can find it on the FDOT GAP portal.
But it'll have to be uploaded both places.
Nope.
No,
just the FDOT GAP portal. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then you can hit apply. And this is where you will be submitting all of your documents. So make sure you are providing a description for the application. And Andrew, if you scroll down a little bit, keep scrolling down, keep scrolling. So as you can see, the gray is shows the requires upload. The blue shows that it's optional. So in this case, proof of lab eligibility coordination, traffic analysis / traffic study coordination, and additional supporting documentation, that is optional. And once you have already uploaded the documents, then the gray should turn to green. And Andrew, if you keep scrolling down a little bit, yes. So another required document that you must submit is cost estimates, which you have to do as well for state road modifications and LI. But also for the TA, what you also must do is manually put the state participation on there, the federal participation and the local participation from your cost estimates. Once you do that, then a total project cost should be automatically formulating down there.
And just a little update, there will be no state participation. It's only going to be federal and local when completing that section regarding the project budget.
And if you have any additional documents, you can also upload them. And once all of that is on there, then you just click submit. It should be showing up, Maya, I think at the top, the submit button.
No, it actually should save all your information once you have actual documents uploaded. Right now, there's no documents uploaded in the system. So that's why you're not seeing the complete button.
And that's how you submit the application and supporting materials for TA. And Andrew, does anyone have any more questions on TA? Okay, Andrew, you can pull back the PowerPoint, please. And those are just some of the steps that I went over already. And now I'm going to pass it back over to Jason.
Okay, so just to kind of in conclusion, the resources that I outlined in the beginning, we have our Complete Streets design guidelines to kind of give you ideas for best practices on types of facilities that fit on specific types of roadways, different configurations to consider. Our Vision Zero Action Plan is a great resource. It's recently updated and we'll have a lot of the information specific to Palm Beach County on our high injury network, and then other information in there as well, just to kind of give you an indication of wherever your project may be being considered. You can see where it's most needed within your entire municipality by looking at some of the maps and graphics within the Vision Zero Action Plan. And then our long range transportation plan just gives you the overarching goals, that why these programs exist and what their intent is to facilitate implementing the vision of the long range transportation plan. And lastly, to the far right here is our interactive map. Our interactive map is located on each one of our grant pages for state road modifications, local initiatives, and transportation alternatives. You'll see interactive map as a link. When you click on that link, you'll see an image very similar to what you see on the far right-hand side here. When you open up the interactive map, you will see that there's a number of different layers on the left-hand side that you can turn on and off with checkboxes. When you turn on and off those, by the name of each one, it'll say what program it applies to, whether it's LI, SRM, or TA. And this is designed for you to identify all of these layers are specific to the scoring for each one of the programs. So with the scoring metrics for each one, you'll see that a lot of them are geographic in nature. So if you want to find a location where it's serving a, you know, within a underserved community, there's points for that. And so we have that as a GIS layer on this particular map. So you can say, well, does it fit within that particular metric and how many points do I get? So you can kind of sketch out how many points you're going to receive for all of the different metrics within the scoring system, which is in the program overview. And if you have a number of different projects and you're forced to choose, this is a good way to kind of estimate what your points are going to be for each one of your potential applicants. And if you have any questions on the map, or if something's not working, or if you just want some clarification on how to use it, you can always reach out to any one of us. And specifically for each program, starting with state road modifications, Andrew did the presentations, but we do have a new colleague coming on board, Nathan George. He's going to run the state road modifications program. His information is at the top. Next is my own, Jason, for local initiatives program, and then Valentina for transportation alternatives. So for each program, there's a specific main contact for each one of them. If you ever have any questions of any sort, please reach out and contact us, especially for the pre-application meeting. Usually the first hurdle after the workshop is scheduling a pre-application meeting. And maybe we could go to the website and show you how that looks, because I just uploaded it today. We have 3 days in November, 14th, 15th, and 16th, I think, but we're going to see that right now. So usually in the conclusion of the workshop, if you're pretty solid and you know what your project's going to be, there's the TPA funding program pre-application meeting. So you can schedule your meeting either in person or virtually. And then when you go there, this is going to pop up. And when this pops up, this is our Calendly scheduling app that we're using. And so when you click on one of those days that are highlighted, they're 45-minute sessions. And there's ones for throughout the entire day. So although there's only 3 days, we can usually we can accommodate about 6 pre-application meetings per day. So I'm hoping that within those 3 days, at least in November, this will give enough flexibility for all the applicants to schedule a time during those 3 days in November. And then I'm going to do the same for December and January. I just have to work with FDOT to kind of get the dates correct within our schedules for December and January. But just to kick it off, we're November 3rd on Thursday. And so next week, there's no availability, but the following week, the week prior to Thanksgiving, basically is why I picked these dates: Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, November 14th, 15th, and 16th. And so there should be plenty of times to accommodate everyone for those dates. And that's how you would go about doing the pre-application meeting and bringing whatever materials you have for potential projects. And, that's the first step in the process. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Maya, and she's going to walk us through the local agency program to get LAP certified to build your project.
As a reminder to those online, if you have a question, you can submit it on the online question and we'll answer it here in person.
All right, let's get started. I just have a brief presentation here about the LAP certification. Again, I am Maya Williams-Gray. I'm the local program administrator with FDOT. So I manage the state and federal grant programs, including the application cycles. That includes LAP certification, any of your local program training, and also the local program staff. So what exactly is LAP? LAP is a reimbursement program that the department is the steward of the federal funds and is responsible for the oversight of every transportation project that's federally funded. This also means that the local agencies are responsible for paying for that construction work or design work up front and then seeking reimbursement from the department, which is the federal funds. When it comes to lab certification, any agency outside of the Department of Transportation that looks to administer a federal aid project, they must seek lab certification. There are two types. One is full certification, which is reserved for county government only. It's a 3-year cert. County can do as many projects within that 3 years that's awarded to them. However, our local municipalities, such as our cities, towns, and villages, they will get a project-specific cert. That certification is renewed every project. We are examining their internal controls. We are looking to see if they are have been successful with administering past lab projects. So it's on a project by project base. And again, just like the full certification, it is performance based. They both, whether it's county or city or town, both certifications are performance. So what do we certify local agencies to do? We're certifying you in the aspects, in the functional areas of design, construction administration, and 2 procurement methods. That means we are going to be involved in your procurement of your professional services, that's your designer and your CEI, as well as your construction contractors. This certification is a multi-step process. So it starts when an agency has been awarded a project. Now, the agency itself is what's going to go through lab certification. It's not an individual, such as it's not a consultant firm. It must be a local municipality that's defined as a local agency. We get a lot of questions about that. So if a consultant firm says, hey, I'm lab certified, I can administer your project, that is incorrect. It has to be the local municipality. And it's not a subdivision within that local. It would be the local agency itself, not just their public works department. And we will be working with that agency once a project has been awarded through the TPA. So whether it's local initiatives or is transportation alternatives, any fairly funded project that the agency wants to administer is going to go through this multi-step process. There's a lot of risk assessments that will need to be completed. These risk assessments are related to the agency's ability to comply with Title VI, ADA, and we're looking at your grant management. We're looking at your staffing. Do you have the experience? Do you have individuals with the knowledge or background to administer these projects successfully? We will, once we receive that initial documentation, central office, our statewide office in Tallahassee, getting a little winded, sorry, but our statewide office will actually conduct an assessment of your financial controls. And then we will examine that. The district will take a look at what type of project monitoring plan we would have to do in order to move forward in the certification process. We will meet with the agency. Once we have all assessments in hand, we will meet with you. We will go over the requirements. We will also make sure you have an understanding of what the program expectation is. And then we will submit a certification package to our district secretary for approval. We have resources that are available to you. We did a workshop, maybe not last summer, but the summer before, a year ago, last July. We did a lab workshop at the district office. It was a recorded webinar. We went through the lab process from project implementation to closeout. I encourage you all. I don't know why I'm getting so. so winded, but I encourage you all to take a look at our resources. There are resources for lab certification. We also have computer-based trainings available for you that goes into a little bit more detail on professional services procurement. Also, Title VI as well. We have our local program manual, which is pretty much our guidelines for the program. So take a look at these resources. It's also helpful to take a look at the workshop that we did last summer. It is available 24/7. So when it is convenient for your team to review, if you all have questions, you all can definitely reach out to the district office. Here are our contacts. I have for Palm Beach County, Ramon Alvarez. He is the Palm Beach local program coordinator. So he is more that day-to-day person for each of your local agency projects. Elizabeth Miranda is my right hand when it comes to lab certification support. So she is one of the contacts. If you have questions about GAP, if you have questions about what documentation that you need to submit for our review as it relates to lab certification.
Maya, we do have one question online.
Okay.
From Michael Owens. Are school districts eligible for either lab certifications?
Okay. Unfortunately, school districts are not. School districts would need to partner with the county in order to administer a project. We have Safe Routes to School, which is another grant. That grant is administered under LAP as well, but the agencies have to partner up, the school boards have to partner up with the county in order to administer the project. Any other questions? Any questions in the room? Yes, sir.
Hey there, Christian Santa, planner for the Village of Wellington. This lab process isn't new, so if we have done this before with previous funding, it's just, is it new or?
It's not new,
Okay.
and you said you're with the Village of Wellington?
Yes.
Yes, we've worked with the Village of Wellington. I think this is the first year we don't have an active project under construction. We just closed out some projects with you all, but your agency is familiar. I believe Michael Odell is the responsible charge for the Village of Wellington, and he has been through the lab certification process, I believe, twice. So yeah, they're very familiar.
Thank you.
The process has not changed since they've been through it. So
thanks.
Yeah, that was a good question as it relates to agencies, whether or not you have been certified in the past, or if you are a new agency. If you have any questions about your eligibility, I encourage you to contact our office. We can let you know who was part of that last lab certification team, or there are areas that we need to work on in order to have you reapply.
We have one more online question. Does a company have to be local in Palm Beach or Florida-based company/office for being qualified for the funding?
Okay, that could be kind of a trick question, but a local agency is the only one that is eligible to receive federal aid funds to administer a project. So if it's a local business, they're not eligible for lab certification, which means they wouldn't be eligible to apply by themselves for any of these grant programs and receive that federal funding. If we're talking about a local business applying for one of the agency's contracts that they're advertising for work, such as if an agency puts a bid out for a construction job and a local construction company bids on it, that's fine, but that advertisement needs to be regional. It can't be a local advertisement. Okay. But again, if it's questions about how the reimbursement works or questions about lab certification, you know, what does a lab team with an agency, what do they look like in terms of, you know, which staffs and what roles they play? If there are questions about GAP, contact my office and we can assist you with that. Any other questions? All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you all at some of the pre-application meetings. Jason went over how you can schedule a meeting with us. I do have, while I manage the team, I'm not an engineer, okay? So we have engineers that will give you engineering advice at each of these pre-application meetings. Okay, so we're taking a look at whether the work is within the right of way. We'll talk about utility. Okay, we'll talk about encroachments. That's a big thing, public involvement. So whether it's optional when you're submitting, I can tell you public involvement always comes up when you are managing a lab project. Okay.
We have another online question.
All right.
What is the maximum number of applications that a municipality can submit, including all types, LI, TA, SRM?
Okay.
So I think it's 2 each. So what we have in the program overviews for each one of those specific programs, the one that's on the screen here is local initiatives. For program requirements, the first one, an applicant may submit a maximum of 2 applications with the exception of Palm Beach County, who can submit up to 6 applications across all departments. So specifically to answer the question, if you're a municipality, you could submit 2 applications for local initiatives, transportation alternatives, and state road modifications. So 2 each, unless you're the county. 2 projects per per program. So you could do 2 LI, 2 SRM, and 2 TA applications. Any more questions on that? No? Okay.
Is there any more questions online anyone would like to ask?
There we go. Yeah, we're here as a resource for you. So if you have any questions or ideas or any feedback for us, please let us know.
She had a question.
Just to confirm, for the pre-applications, you had the appointments posted there for November, but you said there will be pre-applications in December?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to work with FDOT and Maya and her staff because we're trying to get some more consultant support as well. So when we book the pre-application meetings, I'm coordinating with several different people that will be in the room, either virtually or in person. You can do it either way, but there'll be dates in December, at least 3 to 4 days in December and 3 to 4 days in January.
Okay, we'll keep an eye because exactly, we're not ready yet to be able to come with something for what we're planning to do. So we'll just keep an eye on that. And then the other question that I have just to confirm, it's on the documentation, but I just need to confirm. You mentioned new service at 50%, that again, the match will be 50% if we do extension service. Is mentioned somewhere in the application. And again, that's not going to be 80-20. Is it 50-50?
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So like new services, like purchasing, like implementing a new service to.
Exactly. Any new service, we are PAMTran, public transportation.
Right.
So thinking of that, there are new things that we want to try. And again, this is looking into the future, and that's why we're not ready yet. But we just wanted to confirm that if it is new service to the public, we have to meet it at a 50% match.
I would say yes.
Yep. Yep, so that one is for what they call turnkey services. So I think that goes sometimes towards capital and operating for that period of time. But if you're just buying capital, that would just be a regular full eligibility. But if you're doing like a new service that requires that startup, yes, that'd be 50-50.
Okay.
Those they've been difficult in the past to administer. We've had it on our eligibility for quite some time now, but I think in the past, historically, we've ran into a lot of issues trying to do that with trolley services. So there might be some hurdles, but I think it is possible. Yeah.
Okay, then we'll check when we have that to see what have been the issues before so that we're ready. Thank you.
But in the terms of Paul Tran, if you're just buying new capital for new buses for a new service, it might be 100% because you're only buying the service. But if you're looking to implement the maintenance and the operation of the service, like it's a brand new standalone service, then it might be just 50% because some of those funds are going to be used not just for capital.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And just to close the loop on the scheduling for the application, for the pre-application meetings, because there's two options, there's the in-person and virtual. Now I have 3 days listed in November, but in the coming months for December and January, when I list those days and they don't work for you and you have other days that are ideal for you, you can always reach out to us and we could always do it virtually. So virtual appointments and pre-application meetings are probably the most flexible because none of us have to travel and it could be more easily accommodated. So if you do come up with days in December and January that are more ideal for you than what we have listed, feel free to reach out to us and we can most likely make it work one way or the other. And most likely it's going to be virtual because that's the most flexible way for all of us to be in the same, in the same place at the same time reviewing the information. In person is a little more tricky. So that's why I have solid dates and times selected. So there's the flexibility of coming into the office and we know that those 3 days are booked and we have the availability in office to accommodate it. But virtual is always, it's the most flexible. Yes, Jason.
I know you said that you could approach a pre-app meeting with little information, but are there certain things you recommend bringing to those that would help facilitate the meeting?
The most the best conceptualization of the project, the best, it can be ideas, but the more you have on that idea in terms of how you want to implement it, what are the concepts and what's the feasibility of implementing it, that's really, the more you come with, the better the conversation is, because there's always nuances in the field that we see in field visits, or when you start to talk about a project and maybe we do like a Google Street View, there's a lot of questions on either where's the right-of-way lines, where's, there's environmental concerns, or just there could be a wide range of not issues, but questions. So the more information you have, the better, because it's more fruitful for a discussion. But sometimes you just come up with ideas and you just want to know, I have a project, but I don't know which program it fits best under. And then we can kind of workshop. If you add these components, it's best for TA or LI, or depending on the amount of funds that you're seeking. Sometimes it's under $1.5 million and TA would be a better fit just because it's under $1.5 million, but it could also go into LI because you still meet the criteria for both. So those kind of questions, when you come up with when you just have concepts, that's where we kind of it's still a good conversation to figure out where would it fit best? How could we fund it in which avenue? And what are the components that are usually what's eligible and not eligible? That's a lot of the bigger questions of, this is a project, is it eligible? What program does it meet? And then talking about public outreach is always a conversation piece for every project is there public support for the project?
All right, thank you.
Sure. You guys have any questions anymore? Okay, sure.
With regards to product certification, like for example, if PamTran decides that they would like to use this specific bus stop shelter, do you have any restrictions other than, since it's federal funding, that it has to be Buy in America? Because some projects do have certain restrictions that if it's specific, does the municipality or the county want that particular product, then they have to fund them.
Right. So there's kind of like, there's standard street furniture or infrastructure that is supported and that can be paid for and reimbursed, but sometimes there's decorative lighting or decorative furniture or things that are just above and beyond the standard. And those things usually have to be paid for by the applicant because it's beyond the standard of what would still meet the requirement, but you're going above and beyond that of doing something more decorative, or I guess you could say maybe just more expensive or more extravagant, and it wouldn't be covered under the grant because it's beyond like a standard, say, light pole, as opposed to street furniture that's decorative lighting that matches a theme in a downtown or in a specific location.
But oftentimes the reason why requiring that is to compatibility for maintenance purposes. For example, Palm Beach County Traffic Engineering Divisions, they want their specific electronics for the pet and traffic lights. Hamtran, perhaps for the repair of the bus shelters, they require a specific one, so they don't want to have to get different parts of different supplier. So oftentimes it's not just for decoration, it's
right. Yeah, it's just for maintenance for, yes. And I think that's just something that we go through the vetting process and figure out how best to accommodate it. Maybe it's an incremental cost where there's a base cost that are covered, but if it's beyond that, you pay for the incremental increase in those specific items. Or maybe there's an exception because it's part of an overall system and this is what we're buying and we need to buy more of the same things because the system operates, or this is the infrastructure that we already have all over town. And so we want to have the same infrastructure, but it costs not a significant amount more. So I think it's just something that's depending on review by FDOT to look at more closely and make a justification for it. I think that's where it just comes down to it.
If it's a certain flashing or connected, which is different signals that you have in your area, in your city. It is still, sorry. Yes, I was saying that in terms of trying to use similar technology for your area, per your city policies, that is something that we'll definitely take a closer look at during vetting, but it's eligible, it just has to be justified. A lot of agencies have built into their policies that they have to use for maintenance. They have a maintenance plan that they have to use this particular type of, signalization. That is something that if you provide us that backup, even show us that during vetting, that's something we can even give you a concrete answer on, but we have that on several projects. And if it's a proprietary, proprietary product. Yes.
That's what I was going to mention.
We'll just have to go through a proprietary products process. We get it approved by our district design engineer as part of our oversight of the design. And it's still eligible.
And with that proprietary certification, which is that the process, it will have to be included as part of the application.
No, you wouldn't need to do the proprietary before applying. That will happen while the department's providing oversight of the design of the project. So that's after it's been awarded.
Okay.
Yes.
What if you have a project that the scope or the limits cover both a state road and a local road?
Okay. Yeah, that does happen. And so basically in the resolutions and the documentation, you're certifying that the roadway owner is acceptable to the project, both on both sides, the state roadway, the county roadway. They're both okay with the improvements on both of the roadways. And then whoever the implementing agency is who's committing to construct the project on the behalf of the two roadway owners, which it could be a third implementing agency that's neither the county or the state, possibly. It could be a local municipality improving county and state roads within their municipality. So it's just a matter of coordination between all three of them. if in this example, and then having a resolution of the roadway owner, the implementing agency, and then the person who is ultimately going to own and operate the facility.
What about the application?
The would you,
Because, well, there was
like
one
who
that
would
was-
apply?
Or would you do it under the local initiatives or the transportation alternatives, or would it be because one was state road?
Right, so the nature of the roadway, if it's only a state roadway, probably SRM. If it's a mix of different roadways, it would probably be better suited under local initiatives. And then in terms of the dollar amounts, if it's a smaller project, transportation alternatives also works, but it's usually geared towards local roadways for transportation alternatives because the maximum per project says $1.5 million, and it's easy to get to $1.5 million with a project. So 5 million gives you a lot better buffer with the local initiatives program.
And I just want to add to that, because if you have two municipalities that are coming together to submit an application, in the end, if that application is awarded, there needs to be a lead. There needs to be a lead agency that's going to be responsible for, administering the project. It won't be both agencies. So if it's the city of West Palm Beach and Palm Beach County, one of them, only one, would be that lead agency, and there will be a responsible charge, an agency staff member that's going to be that primary point of contact, that day-to-day person that the department will work with. Being a lead agency also means that you are responsible for any cost overruns should they be non-eligible or there's not additional funding available to support the project. So any agreements, between the lead agency and the other entity involved, that would have to be established as well.
And I'm just going to add to what Jason was saying. So you can also use our mapping tool to see if your potential project is within the on a federal road or off the federal road. And if it's on and off, for the functional classification, that would be arterial all the way to local roadways. And if it's on, which in that case is just local initiatives, it would be minor and major collector functional classification and above. And yeah, as you can see it on the screen. Federal aid roadways. Mm-hmm.
Are these presentations, because there's a lot of good links, they're going to be posted probably later today, right, on the website, so everyone knows?
Yep, on our website.
So there's one distinction here with what Andrew has on the map. So there's the roadway owner. So the owner could be local, county, or state, or even private, but then the federal aid eligible network, is the top of the National Highway System or the Surface Transportation Program. One of those is the federal aid eligible network, which I think is the top. Oh, okay. So those two roadway classifications combined are the actual network that is eligible for funding for local initiatives. So it's good to go and use our interactive map because within your municipality, you may know it already, but it's a good way to identify which roadways are eligible for federal funding, which it's not always obvious based on the roadway owner. So the federal aid eligible roadway network traverses many of the roadways that are owned by multiple different roadway owners, be it local, state, or county. So it's just a good resource to begin to start to look at. When you're looking at potential projects, those potential projects could be on a federal aid eligible roadway network, and it just makes it more advantageous to pursue funding because they're eligible for funding by the nature of that designation, which is a federal designation, which they review on not a regular basis, but in the coming years, they're going to review the federal aid eligible roadway network and change it to some degree, or at least verify or certify all the roadways that are out there now as federal aid eligible, which I imagine it would expand, but we'll see what happens. I'm up for any other questions. Okay. Well, we're here till 4:30. It's 3:40. We can take a break and eat snacks and come back and think of more questions. Or we could wrap it up. I don't know. Okay, we'll wrap it up and then get to the snacks. I'm just kidding. Okay, thank you guys. I appreciate everybody coming. Thank you.